The Clockmaker's Choice. The number came from a guy at the bar. I don't even remember his name, just another face in the Thursday night crowd at Rosie's, nursing a beer and minding his own business until he wasn't. We got to talking the way strangers do when the game's a blowout and there's nothing else to look at. He asked what I did. I told him. He asked if I was happy. I laughed and said, "Nobody's happy, not really." And he looked at me with these pale eyes that seemed older than his face and said, "Some people fix that." Fix what? Being unhappy? Being stuck. He slid a napkin across the bar. There was a number written on it in pencil, the handwriting small and precise. "You call this number, leave your name and address, someone will come." Someone who does what? He finished his beer and set the empty glass down with a soft click. "Gives you a choice," he said, "the one you didn't know you needed." I should have thrown the napkin away, should have written it off as drunk talk, bar nonsense, the kind of mystical bullshit lonely people tell themselves to feel like the universe gives a damn. But I put it in my wallet instead, right behind my driver's license, where I'd see it every time I bought gas or showed my ID. It stayed there for 3 months. I saw Hasoon Khatri on a Tuesday afternoon. He was in the parking lot of the Walmart, loading groceries into a van with a wheelchair lift. His wife was helping, Samira. I'd learned her name over the years, though I'd never spoken to her. She was smaller than I remembered, grayer, moving with the careful efficiency of someone who'd been doing this for a long time. Hasoon's chair was electric now. The last time I'd seen him up close, maybe 10 years ago, he'd still been using a manual one. His arms were still strong enough to push himself. But something had changed. His hands sat folded in his lap while the chair did the work, and when Samira leaned down to adjust his footrest, I saw him wince at some pain I couldn't see. 24 years. I sat in my truck and watched them drive away, and the shame was so thick in my throat I couldn't swallow. That night, I called the number. The voicemail was nothing special, a beep, no greeting, no instructions. I said my name and address and hung up, feeling stupid, feeling desperate, feeling like a man grasping at fairy tales because reality had worn him down to nothing. 4 days later, someone knocked on my door. He was small, that was the first thing I noticed, maybe 5'4", with delicate hands and a face that could have been 50 or 500. He wore a gray suit that looked like it belonged to another century, and he carried a leather bag that clinked softly when he moved. "Mr. Warren?" His voice was gentle, accented in a way I couldn't place. "I'm told you're looking for a choice." I don't even know what that means. He smiled. "May I come in?" I stepped aside. He walked past me into the living room, his eyes moving across the space like he was reading it. The sagging couch, the TV older than some of my co-workers, the walls bare except for a clock my mother had given me before she died. He stopped in front of that clock, studying it. "This belonged to someone who loved you," he said. "My mother. She wound it every Sunday." I didn't know how he knew that, but he was right. Every Sunday morning, before church, she'd stand on her toes and wind that clock, and the sound of the mechanism clicking into place was the sound of my childhood. "I haven't wound it in years," I said. "It stopped working after she passed." He opened his leather bag and withdrew a small set of tools, instruments so fine they looked like they belonged in a surgeon's kit. "May I?" I nodded. He removed the clock from the wall with a gentleness that made my chest ache, sat down at my kitchen table, opened the back panel, and began to work, his nimble fingers moving among the gears and springs with the confidence of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. "Tell me why you called," he said, not looking up. "I don't know where to start." "Start with the weight." His fingers never stopped moving. "The thing you carry, the thing you've always carried." I sat down across from him, watched him work, and started talking. It took an hour to get to the truth. I told him about the shop first, McGivens Auto Repair, where I'd worked for 3 years out of high school. Told him about Dutch, the owner, with his arms like country hams and his Dutch boy haircut, and his opinions about anyone who didn't look like him. I told him about September 12, 2001, when the whole country was raw and bleeding and looking for someone to blame. I told him about Hasoon. He'd come in for an oil change, that's all. Just an oil change. He was polite, soft-spoken, drove a Honda Civic that had seen better days. His English was perfect. Better than Dutch's, honestly. But that didn't matter. Nothing mattered except the color of his skin and the date on the calendar. "What happened?" the clockmaker asked. I closed my eyes. I'd replayed it so many times, the memory was worn smooth like a river stone. Dutch started in on him right away, asking where he was from, what he was doing in this country. Had he celebrated when the towers came down? Hasoon tried to stay calm, tried to explain he was born in Detroit, that his parents were from Iran, that he was as horrified as anyone. But Dutch didn't want explanations. No. I opened my eyes. He wanted a fight. And when Hasoon wouldn't give him one, he made it happen anyway. The first punch came out of nowhere. Hasoon went down hard, glasses skittering across the concrete floor. I was standing by the tool bench, 15 feet away, my hands frozen at my sides. Dutch kicked him twice, 3 times, screaming about terrorists and towel heads and making them pay. Then he pulled the knife. "It was a box cutter," I said. "We use them to open packaging, break down cardboard. Dutch always had one in his pocket." "And you watched." It wasn't an accusation, just a fact, stated plainly. Somehow, that made it worse. I watched. I stood there and watched while he stabbed Hasoon 4 times. Back, shoulder, lower spine. I watched Hasoon try to crawl away. I watched Dutch kick him onto his back and spit on him and call him a terrorist piece of shit who got what he deserved. Why didn't you stop it? The question I'd asked myself every day for 24 years. Because I was scared. The words tasted like ash. Because Dutch was twice my size and mean as a snake, and I knew if I stepped in, he'd turn that knife on me. Because I was weak. Because I was a coward. Because I told myself it wasn't my fight, wasn't my problem, wasn't my... My voice broke. The clockmaker set down his tools. The clock lay open on the table between us, its gears exposed like a mechanical heart. What happened to Hasoon? Dutch called the cops, told them Hasoon had made terrorist threats, tried to attack him. Small town, day after 9/11. They didn't ask questions, didn't investigate. Hasoon spent 3 weeks in the hospital and the rest of his life in a wheelchair, paralyzed from the waist down. His wife had to quit her job to take care of him. His kids grew up watching their father suffer. And Dutch? Nothing. Not a goddamn thing. Cops called it self-defense. Hasoon couldn't afford a lawyer, couldn't fight back against the story Dutch told. He just had to live with it. All of them did. And you? I stared at the table. I had to live with knowing I could have stopped it, could have at least tried, could have been the one person in that shop who said, no, this is wrong. But I didn't. I let it happen, and I let Dutch keep paying my wages for another 8 years, because I needed the job, because I was too much of a coward to even quit. Where is Dutch now? Dead. 16 years after it happened, a car lift failed, crushed him. Garage closed down after that. I got a job at Quick Lube, been there ever since. The clockmaker nodded slowly. He picked up his tools and resumed his work on the clock, his movements precise and unhurried. You've seen Hasoon since, he said, haven't you? Around town, he stayed. God knows why, but he stayed. Every time I see him, I shook my head. He knows. He knows I was there. He knows I didn't help. He doesn't say anything, but I can see it in his eyes. He doesn't hate me. That's the worst part. He just knows what I am. What are you? A coward who let a good man's life get destroyed because I was afraid of getting hurt. The clockmaker was quiet for a long moment. His fingers worked among the gears, adjusting, aligning, bringing something dead back to life. Hasoon died, I said, last month. I read about it in the paper. Multiple surgeries over the years, complications. His body just gave out. He was 58, had grandchildren he never got to chase around a yard, had a wife who spent 24 years being his legs, had a whole life stolen from him while I stood there and watched. I wiped my eyes. I hadn't cried in years, hadn't thought I still could. That's why I called. I don't know what you do. I don't know what any of this is. But if there's a choice, any choice, that lets me fix this, I'll take it, whatever it costs. The clockmaker stopped working. He looked at me across the table, and his eyes were ancient, older than the clock, older than the house, older than anything I'd ever seen. There is a choice, he said, but you need to understand what it means. Tell me. He held up the clock. It was whole again, the back panel closed, the hands set to a time I didn't recognize. I can send you back, he said, to that day, to that moment. You'll wake up in your younger body and your younger life with all the knowledge you have now. You'll have a chance to make a different choice. To stop Dutch, to do whatever you decide to do. The choice will be yours, but, he held up a finger, you don't get to choose the outcome. You can change your actions, but you cannot control what happens because of them. Do you understand? I think so. You don't. His voice was kind but firm. You're imagining a version where you step in, stop the violence, save Hasoon, and walk away a hero. That may happen. It may not. The future that follows your choice will be unknown to you. You won't get to see it. You won't get to know if you made things better or worse. You will simply make the choice and live, or not, with its consequences. Or not. He set the clock on the table. This is my gift and my burden, he said. I offer choices. I don't guarantee outcomes. Some people make their choice and go on to live long, full lives. Others don't survive the moment of choosing. I can't tell you which you'll be. I can only tell you that once you decide, there's no going back. I stared at the clock, at my mother's clock, whole again, ticking softly like it had when I was a boy. And if I say no, then you go on as you have. You carry your weight. You live your life such as it is until it ends naturally. There's no shame in that choice, Mr. Warren. Many people decide the unknown is worse than the burden they know. I thought about my life, my empty apartment, my nothing job, my decades of shame and silence. I thought about all the things I'd never done because I'd never felt like I deserved them. The relationships I'd sabotaged, the opportunities I'd let pass, the slow, grinding punishment I'd inflicted on myself for being the kind of man who watches evil happen and does nothing. I thought about Hasoon in that parking lot, his hands folded and useless in his lap. I thought about his widow, Samira, who would spend the rest of her life alone. How do I do it? I asked. The clockmaker stood. He placed the clock back on the wall, exactly where it had been, and for the first time in years, I heard it ticking. Go to sleep, he said. When you wake, you'll be there. September 12th, 2001. The rest is up to you. That's it? That's everything. He picked up his bag, his tools clinking softly. The choice is yours, Mr. Warren. What you do with it is between you and your conscience." He walked to the door, stopped with his hand on the knob. "I won't tell you what to do," he said, "but I will tell you this. I've been making this offer for a very long time. The people who find peace aren't always the ones who change the past. Sometimes they're simply the ones who finally stop running from who they are." He opened the door. "Good luck, Mr. Warren." And then he was gone. I sat with the clock for a long time. The ticking filled the apartment, steady and patient. The sound of my childhood and my mother's hands and every Sunday morning I'd ever known. I thought about what the clockmaker had said, about choices and consequences and the unknown future that waited on the other side of every decision. I thought about being afraid. I'd been afraid my whole life. Afraid of Dutch, afraid of confrontation, afraid of being seen, being noticed, being the kind of person who takes up space in a world. I'd made myself small because small was safe. Small meant no one expected anything from you. Small meant you could watch terrible things happen and tell yourself it wasn't your place to stop them. I'd been so afraid of dying that I'd forgotten to live. I went to bed at 11 o'clock, lay in the dark, listening to the clock tick, wondering if this was real or some elaborate delusion, some breakdown finally manifesting after decades of suppressed guilt. I fell asleep thinking about Hasoon's face. I woke up to the smell of motor oil and the sound of classic rock on a tinny radio. For a moment, I didn't understand. The ceiling was wrong, water-stained tiles instead of the popcorn texture of my apartment. The bed was wrong, too narrow, too hard. I sat up and found myself in the break room of McGivens Auto Repair, stretched out on the lumpy couch where I used to catch naps between jobs. My hands, I held them up and stared. They were young, smooth. The calluses were there, but fresh, not the weathered leather they'd become over 24 years of work. I touched my face and felt a jaw that hadn't started to sag, skin that hadn't started to wrinkle. The calendar on the wall showed September 12, 2001. The radio was playing the Eagles' Desperado. Outside, I could hear Dutch moving around the shop, the clang of tools, the rumble of his voice as he talked to himself the way he always did. And then I heard a car pull in. A Honda Civic. I knew the sound of that engine. I'd heard it in my dreams for 24 years. I got up. My body felt strange, lighter, stronger, unfamiliar. I walked to the door of the break room and looked out into the shop. Hasoon was getting out of his car. He was so young, mid-30s, thick black hair, glasses that caught the fluorescent light. He wore a button-down shirt and khakis, probably on his way to work, just stopping in for a quick oil change before his day began. He had no idea what was coming, no idea that in 15 minutes his whole life would change. Dutch emerged from the back, wiping his hands on a rag. I saw his eyes narrow the moment he saw Hasoon, saw the way his shoulders squared, his jaw tightened, his whole body shifting into something predatory. "Help you?" His voice was already cold. "Yes, hello," Hasoon smiled. God, that smile. So open, so trusting. "I was hoping to get an oil change. The sign says no appointment necessary." "Sign says a lot of things." Dutch didn't move from where he stood, blocking the path to the service desk. "Where you from?" "Detroit originally, but I've been in town about 3 years now. Work over at—" "Not what I meant." Hasoon's smile flickered. He understood. Of course he understood. He'd been dealing with this his whole life, and now, with the tower still smoking in New York, he was dealing with it more than ever. "My parents were from Iran," he said quietly. "I was born here. I'm an American citizen." "Iran." Dutch spat the word like it was poison. "That's so." I watched from the doorway, my heart pounding. In my memory, this was the moment I'd frozen, The moment I told myself it wasn't my business, that Dutch was just running his mouth, that it would blow over if I kept my head down. It hadn't blown over. I stepped out of the break room. "Dutch!" My voice cracked on the word. "He just wants an oil change. I can take care of it." Dutch turned. His eyes were flat, dangerous. "Did I ask for your input, Warren?" "No, but..." "Then shut your mouth and let me handle this." He turned back to Hasoon, and I saw his hand drift toward his pocket. The box cutter. The blade that would change everything. "You people think you can come into my shop days after your friends flew planes into buildings full of innocent people?" "They weren't my friends." Hasoon's voice was steady, but I could see him backing up, sensing the danger. "What happened yesterday was evil. I'm as horrified as you are." "Bullshit." Dutch stepped closer. "You're all the same, smiling, pretending to be American, waiting for your chance. Well, not in my shop, not in my town." "I think I should go." Hasoon turned toward his car. Dutch grabbed his arm. "You don't walk away from me." And I saw it. The flash of metal as his hand came out of his pocket. The box cutter, blade extended. The same blade that had severed Hasoon's spinal cord and destroyed his life. I moved. I don't remember deciding to. There was no moment of courage, no conscious thought. My body just moved. 24 years of regret and guilt and shame propelling me forward. And suddenly, I was between them, my hand on Dutch's chest, pushing him back. "Stop!" The word came out stronger than I expected. "This is wrong, Dutch. This is fucking wrong, and you know it." Dutch stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "The hell are you doing, Warren?" "He's a customer. He came in for an oil change, that's it. He didn't do anything to you. He didn't do anything to anyone. He's just a man trying to live his life." "He's a terrorist." "He's a guy from Detroit with the Honda Civic." I was shouting now, all the things I'd never said pouring out of me. "He's not responsible for what happened. He's not responsible for anything except being brown and in the wrong place at the wrong time. And if you touch him, if you hurt him, you're not a patriot. You're just a racist piece of shit who's been looking for an excuse." Dutch's face went purple. "You little..." He swung. Not a punch. The blade. I saw it coming, had time to think, this is it. And then there was a pain, sharp and bright, in my stomach. Once, twice, 3 times. I heard Hasoon scream, heard Dutch cursing, felt his hand shove me backward, felt myself falling. The concrete was cold against my back. I looked down and saw blood, so much blood, spreading across my shirt, pooling beneath me. My hands pressed against the wounds automatically, but I could feel it was too late, too deep, too much. Dutch stood over me, the bloody box cutter still in his hand. His face was twisted with rage and something else, fear maybe, the first dawning realization of what he'd done. "You stupid son of a bitch," he said. "You stupid. Go!" Hasoon's voice somewhere to my left. "Go! I'm getting help. Just hold on." I heard footsteps running, a door slamming, Hasoon going for help. Still trying to save someone even after everything. Dutch looked down at me, at the blood, at the blade in his hand. Then he turned and ran out the back. The coward's exit. The same way he'd have escaped consequences in my old timeline. I lay on the concrete and watched the fluorescent lights buzz overhead. Was it what you expected? The clockmaker was sitting on an overturned bucket a few feet away. I hadn't seen him arrive, but he was there, in his gray suit, with his ancient eyes and his gentle voice. "No," I managed. The pain was fading now, replaced by something cold and distant. I didn't know I'd die. He lifted his head. "No, you didn't know. That was the choice, to act without knowing the cost." I thought about that, about all the years I'd spent afraid of consequences, calculating risks, protecting myself from everything, including my own conscience. "Hasoon," I said, "will he—" "I can't tell you that." The clockmaker's voice was kind but firm. "You don't get to know the outcome. You made your choice. Your future will unfold as it will." "But he ran. He went for help. That means he's okay, right? He's not hurt. He's not—" "You're bleeding out on the floor of an auto shop in 2001, Mr. Warren. What happens to Hasoon in the hours and years that follow is not something you'll ever know." I wanted to argue, wanted to demand answers, certainly some assurance that my death meant something, changed something, mattered. But I realized I didn't need it. I'd stood up. After 24 years of carrying the weight of my cowardice, I'd finally stood up. I'd put myself between the blade and an innocent man. I'd said the words I should have said, done the thing I should have done. Whatever happened next, I'd made my choice. "Was it worth it?" the clockmaker asked. "The price you paid?" I looked down at my hands, at the blood spreading through my fingers, dark and warm, at the proof that I had finally, after 43 years of being small and afraid, done something that mattered. "Every drop," I said. The clockmaker nodded. He reached out and touched my forehead, and his fingers were cool, gentle, like a benediction. "Rest now, Mr. Warren. You've earned it." The lights were dimming. The pain was gone. I could hear sirens somewhere in the distance. Help coming. Maybe too late for me, but not too late for Hasoon. I closed my eyes. And for the first time in 24 years, I wasn't afraid. They found him on the floor of McGibbon's auto repair, bleeding from multiple stab wounds. The victim, Hasoon Khatri, 34, of Cedar Falls, had run to the gas station next door, screaming for someone to call 911. By the time the ambulance arrived, Kyle Warren was already dead. Dylan Dutch McGibbons was apprehended 3 hours later at his home, the box cutter still in his truck, Warren's blood still on his clothes. The trial was quick. Multiple witnesses, clear evidence. Self-defense didn't hold up when the victim was an unarmed employee who'd been trying to stop an assault. Dutch got 25 years. Hasoon Khatri testified at the sentencing hearing. He talked about the young mechanic who'd stepped between him and a blade, who'd called out racism when it would have been easier to stay silent, who'd given his life to protect someone he'd never met. "I don't know why he did it," Hasoon said, "but I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of it." He went on to volunteer with interfaith organizations, spoke at schools about hate and heroism, and the choices we make when no one's watching. Named his second son, Kyle. He lived to be 82 years old, saw his grandchildren grow up, died in his sleep, his wife beside him, in a house full of photographs and memories and love, none of which Kyle Warren ever knew. But somewhere, in a room outside of time, a small man with nimble fingers smiled and wound a clock that had belonged to someone who loved him, and the ticking sounded, just for a moment, like redemption.